Hey guys, welcome to AECVC's latest thesis. Now, imagine a world where a 190 years old energy infrastructure giant acquires a market-leading software company. The result might be a one-stop shop that could revolutionize the way we design and plan our future data centers and energy infrastructure for the electrify everything movement. I'm talking, of course, about Schneider Electric's potential acquisition of Bentley Systems, which I see as a bold move that could potentially unlock massive opportunities in the booming infrastructure market. But it doesn't stop there. It's not all. This deal that the Financial Times reported on Friday might just be the catalyst for a new wave of innovation and competition in computer-aided design, something I dubbed last year the CAD Wars. So here's my thesis, what Schneider Electric might be doing to win the data centers and energy infrastructure battlefield of the CAD Wars, coming up now. Hey guys, so today we're gonna talk about a market that I have dubbed last year the CAD Wars market, computer-aided design wars market. And there's been a news trigger in the last day that has preempted the next episode of the CAD Wars, and that is computer-aided design and planning software for the infrastructure segment. The news piece that I'm referring to is that on Friday's Financial Times, it was reported that Schneider Electric is in discussions to potentially acquire Bentley Systems. Schneider Electric is a French multinational market leader when it comes to infrastructure products and infrastructure solutions for the grid transition, the electrification, traditional road, highway infrastructure, telco networks, which makes about 36 billion of revenue a year and is valued currently by the public market at round about 120 billion. So it's a massive behemoth global market leader. While Bentley Systems also is a market leader in its own right, it is one of the foremost, if not the foremost, producer of software solutions for the infrastructure segment. Also again for grid and electrification, as well as more traditional infrastructure. We're going to look at the Bentley portfolio today on this chat, but Bentley makes about 1.2 billion in annual revenue and has a market cap with a relatively high multiple of about 16 billion US dollar currently. So there's a 120 billion company reportedly in discussions to acquire a 16 billion company, one that is more of a traditional asset heavy and hardware company that wants to acquire a software company. So this is an interesting piece to chat about, like what's the thesis behind this reported acquisition. So let's start with the infrastructure software, design software market. So if you look at the structure of the market, just to give you a high level overview, there's different sectors in which you would use design software and computer-aided design software. The first that comes to everyone's mind is architecture. So that's where everything starts, which includes building information modeling, BIM. Then there's infrastructure and civil engineering, which oftentimes needs different software suites and why you can't lump it together with architecture and BIM. Then there's industrial, there's media and entertainment. So, we have CAD software suites that work for, Hollywood studios as well. So that's a sector. And then finally, there's let's lump it together, all other sectors. For example, there's specified CAD software for healthcare and so on and so forth. So architecture, BIM, infrastructure, civil engineering, industrial and manufacturing, and then there is media and entertainment. So that's what the market looks like, right? And so this software is being used along a process of designing and planning solutions in each of these sectors. And usually it starts with modeling, then there's a simulation part where software is required, then you deliver the project, again there's software required, and then you go into the operations phase or asset performance phase. So from modeling, simulation, delivery, and asset performance. And you can already see, because of all this fragmentation of potential sectors that need specific solutions as well as different process steps, it's a very fragmented industry with lots of specific functions and specialty functions. And so that's also what generally the the amount of offerings in terms of software looks like. But in spite of this fragmentation of functionalities, typically in each of these sectors, architecture, BIM, civil engineering, you would have like one authoring tool market leader. So in manufacturing, for example, one of the foremost authoring solutions is SolidWorks from Dassault Systèmes. Whereas if you go into architecture and BIM, it would be Revit from Autodesk, and a little bit across sectors, you would have the a little bit older but still valuable suite of AutoCAD, also from Autodesk. And the more you go into different sectors, the more you will find a market leader. And guess what? In infrastructure and civil engineering, Bentley Systems is the clear market leader for authoring tools, planning tools, design tools. And this infrastructure market is a highly attractive market. So let's talk about why now actually someone wants to make such a potential acquisition. Well, the infrastructure market will, that shouldn't surprise anyone, see massive 30 years plus investment. And that happens around the globe. We have seen it play out in China for the past decades, where China has fueled a lot of its growth into global leadership from internal investment into infrastructure. And we see it play out in the next decade or so in India. India, for example, has committed just $150 billion in infrastructure investments in 2024 and 2025. 2 years, $150 billion just in one country. While the United States, if you look into the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was brought into execution under Biden, it sees about $350 billion of infrastructure investment just in the current bill per October 2023. And so these are two countries. There's still China, which is its own market, but you have the rest of the world. Europe is a market as big as the US, where a lot of infrastructure investment will have to be done. And that's fueled by first principles, because a lot of the world is moving into an electrification and electrifying everything, which means that the energy infrastructure alone will have to be updated. We're moving more and more with the climate change that is happening into also freshwater crises. So the water infrastructure will have to be updated. Transportation in many of the metropolitan areas and generally also the intercity highways of moving goods around will need a strong updating, because most of the infrastructure that was built in the Western world is decades old, in parts 70, 80 or 100 years. So just from these three sectors alone, you will see infrastructure investment, and then come data centers. Then come telecommunications. So the world is going to get a massive infrastructure upgrade here over the next decades, which makes it such an appealing market. And within this market, the why now, I imagine, for someone like Schneider Electric is if you can own the authoring on the one hand side and the data infrastructure around that part of the sector, if you can own authoring and data infrastructure, you're probably going to make a very good amount of dollars in this booming market. So I think that's the why now. That's at least how I am looking at this. But then I'm asking myself, why Bentley? Well, if you look at Bentley's product portfolio here, you will see that this is from Bentley's own investor presentation. You will actually see that Bentley thinks it is the market leader within almost all relevant parts of the infrastructure design and planning process. And then there is one or two other sectors when it comes to industrial where they see someone else as potentially leading, in this case, for example, Hexagon, but also AVEVA. And that is interesting because AVEVA is actually a company that who bought a couple years ago? Schneider Electric bought AVEVA. So that makes Bentley a very interesting target in terms of the software portfolio. And when it comes to the sectors that the software portfolio of Bentley Systems now covers, you see that all of the booming sectors of what we just discussed, from water to telco, electrification, energy efficiency, is something that Bentley with its software suite is covering. And you get all the classical infrastructure included in that. And Bentley itself thinks that they are looking at, just in terms of the design and planning software portion, at about a $30 billion TAM. with the software they're addressing within this big booming market. So really, when you're Schneider Electric and you want into this market, there is really only one company that can give you like an instant boost at scale. You can, of course, also make smaller acquisitions and buy and build this thing together. But like Bentley, from the perspective of a Schneider, I imagine, is like a ready-made at scale kind of company, right? So from there, though, you have to ask yourself, if you're Bentley, hey, why is Schneider a better owner for me? And so that's, in my mind, relatively simply answered. So Schneider Electric, $120 billion market cap company, $36 billion in revenue in the last year. It's a world leader in hardware and increasingly also in some software. Their market leadership sits exactly where Bentley's software portfolio has its strengths. It's in grid and power infrastructure, it's in data centers, and it's in networks, especially telecommunication networks. And Schneider's behavior of the last years has been really interesting. So this company of 190 years old has, under the leadership, made really interesting software moves. A couple years they bought AVEVA for its data infrastructure software for all the customers that Schneider already serves, and there's consulting business around that. And then they have also made an interesting acquisition of a leading European construction ERP software called RIB software. That's also now in the Schneider portfolio. And when you now look at the third puzzle piece within the succession of AVEVA, RIB, and now Bentley, I can't help but think that what they are doing is actually building an authoring and planning suite coupled with a data infrastructure suite, so that they have begun building a one-stop shop. And I think, and this is my thesis here, if I sat in the boardroom of Schneider, I'm hoping that's what they are discussing here, is the thesis seems to be that whoever controls authoring as well as the movement of data within the energy infrastructure, telco infrastructure sectors, whoever controls that can orchestrate the design choices. And that's a great spot to sit in if you're a hardware company traditionally who owns the hardware that goes into these solutions, or who can procure the hardware that goes into these solutions, because you're actually coming from an operational business with a strong supply chain background. If you now add, through the authoring and the data ownership, the design choices, you're becoming a one-stop shop. And I find that highly, highly attractive between the offering AVEVA as data, ERP through the RIB software, and now Bentley with the authoring tool. And what's interesting here is, if you think about it, this move is much easier to make in a way for a 190-year-old company than it is for a 30-year-old software company. And I'm saying that because someone that comes from an offline operating history to add a software business to enrich that model, I believe is more easy than it is for an asset-light platform type player that started as a software company to move into the asset-heavy operational piece. So from operations into software is easier than from platform and software into operations. So in my opinion, it's a really interesting move that not a lot of companies like Schneider could actually pull off. So you're already seeing in my thesis here that I rate this as a potential, this rumor, it's still a rumor at this point, but I rate this rumor as a very highly strategic move if Schneider can execute on the required product platform between AVEVA, RIB, Bentley, and the other softwares that they want to add to the platform. However, though, I do think from a financial perspective, the deal that was being discussed in Financial Times probably has a big strategic premium to it. Because if you look at Bentley's numbers, which are, they are public as it's a publicly listed company, Bentley does not have what I would call a great capital efficiency. And probably that's because of a ton of overpriced acquisitions that Bentley did over the last decade, which is north of 20, right? So their capital efficiency is not particularly good. And also Bentley, in terms of its market capitalization, is relatively higher priced compared to peers like PTC, Autodesk, Nemetschek, because Bentley sits at about 35 to 40x of EBITDA and Autodesk sits at roughly half of that. So it's a relatively high priced company at this stage. So a lot of expectation priced into Bentley currently. And that's even more worrisome because Bentley has not the best revenue growth. So they're at a CAGR of about 6% of annual growth, and the EBIT margin of Bentley sits at about 22%, while almost all CAD peers across the other sectors to Bentley are better. They're better in revenue growth, they're better in EBIT margin. So Bentley is this company that is relatively high priced, doesn't grow as fast as others, doesn't have as great margins as others, doesn't have this great capital efficiency. But the one thing they have is market leadership and the software portfolio for the infrastructure segment. And that's why it's a strategic deal, perhaps not as much the financial deal that you would look for. Now, finally, what this means for the market is I'm really excited about this if it goes through, because it means that the CAD wars that I've been dubbing last year, they're on. It will create an insanely liquid acquisition market around all the different solutions because it's providing a blueprint for how you can build the next generation of winners in CAD, in computer-aided design. The last 40 years have seen how people can build the current generation of CAD platform players who are purely software players. But Schneider, with this move and this thesis that I'm talking about here, is providing us a blueprint for how to build the next gen companies that are built on CAD authoring as well as data infrastructure around CAD solutions. And this blueprint will create an insanely liquid acquisition market and a very highly innovative market that already the best of the founders of you guys out there, you're building all these great solutions for this market. So I couldn't really be more excited. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe under acvc.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. See you next time.